Hi guys, welcome back to Cornerstone Chat Season 2. I'm Robert.
I'm Aislinn.
And today we have a very special guest with us. This is Danielle. You've probably seen her in our previous videos. And she's back to special visit just for you guys.
Ooh.
Today though, she's going to be talking about grief.
Oh.
I am indeed.
Yeah.
Did you have anything you wanted to say before I started?
No.
Right. Okay, so the request was to talk about grief, and obviously we take everything from a biblical perspective and a scriptural perspective, but that's not to say there's not some good wisdom out there. So there is like some traditional ways of viewing grief and having an understanding of grief. But I think it's always good to just kind of define what grief is so that we know what we're talking about before we get started. Because how do you even know what we're talking about if we're like all assuming we're on the same page, but we're not? So that we can be on the same page, grief is often referred to as that stage when something usually when someone passes away, to be honest, someone dies. But it can happen for all kinds of different things. It can happen for breakups. It can happen I think it can even happen for like, maybe you have a vision or a goal for your life and then you realize that is not actually what's going to happen. And so you sort of grieve the idea of what the fantasy was or what your goal was. So grief comes in, it's thought, in theory, that grief can come between 5 to 12 stages, and they're considered stages of grief, and they were put into theory by a woman named Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she decided that this was a good way of describing it. And so she put the 5 stages of grief, and they were denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And I love that because denial is like, it's not happening. It's not happening. I'll shut myself down. And our body sort of goes into this mode, or our mind goes into this mode of like survival. And so we go into a stage of denial. It's not happening. And then, so I think what happens is eventually you can't live in the stage of denial for a long time. So then you go into the stage of anger where you're mad that it's happening. Like you're sad and you're grieving the idea of what was or what was going to be, or the loss of somebody that kept you company, or the love that you felt for something. And so I think it's important to realize that all the emotions that we have during grief, they can't really be super put under control. And they can't really, I mean, I'm not saying that because you're angry, you're allowed to hurt everybody, but being angry is a good sign that you are hurting. And maybe other people can observe that in each other and say, oh, they're hurting and we need to be there for them and we need to be able to help them and pray with somebody through that. And also when you have things, we get to a point where we have this point where we bargain. So maybe if you know someone who's suffering with a disease, or you want something so bad, you start to have this process of bargaining with God. And you say, Lord, if you do this for me, then I'll do this. It's called Foxhole Christianity in some places. Like there's a story that Ernest Hemingway tells about being in the war, and there's the bombshells were coming at night, and one of the men that was in the foxhole, he said, if you get me out of this disaster, if you change the situation for me, I'll tell everybody about you, God. And then Ernest Hemingway tells the rest of the story, which is that the boy ends up doing something completely different and never tells anybody about God. But we do this thing where we bargain. And we say, if you do this for me, I'll do this for you. And it's part of grief. And then there's the other stages of depression and then acceptance. But I think what's interesting is that oftentimes people think that these 5 stages go step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. Oh, the goal is acceptance. I've achieved acceptance. And now I'm not grieving anymore. And I don't think that's how grief works.
No.
Grief to me is like this. Grief to me is like, one day I'm feeling angry. Next day I'm acceptance. Then the next day, I'm bargaining again. And then the next day, and that is grief. Grief is a roller coaster. And grief is an intense, incredibly intense emotion that is very hard to like let yourself go through as well, because sometimes people see grief and they get like kind of put off by it. Oh, I don't know how to deal with that person, or how to deal with their emotions, or how to deal with what they're going through. Because like maybe grief is surrounded around death of an actual person, and not just a dream or a vision or a hope. So then it gets hard for people to know how to treat other people. So I think for ourselves, the first thing is to realize that grief was given to us by God to kind of release a lot of pain. Grief is also a roller coaster, like it's an emotional roller coaster, and you can't expect yourself to be over something really fast. You gotta give yourself the time to heal and let God heal. And maybe like practically speaking, what you could probably do is read up a little bit on grief, but then also be really gentle with yourself and understand that it is what it is. It hurts and it's painful. ask God to help you. Ask your friends to pray for you and help you. And then really lean on like God for your comfort.
Yeah.
Because other human beings are never going to be able to make you feel comfortable with grief. Like, I can tell you grief is okay. And I can tell you feeling depressed is okay and feeling sad is okay. But at the end of the day, you can't stay in that state.
Yeah.
And God's the only one that can really like say, okay, now is enough. People can't say, well, people can say now is enough. But really people don't know when now is enough, but God does.
Yeah.
Because you know how sometimes people are like, get over it.
Yeah.
Just get over it. It's been 5 years. But if you've lost your child or your partner or your best friend or I'm going to say even your cat and your dog, that matters, or any pet. Because a lot of times pets are a massive source of comfort and companionship. You know, so things like that, like no one can say you need to be over it now. You need to really turn to God and say, you know, like, God, like heal my heart and hope that, and people that can't be patient with you, you just need to tell them, listen, I'm grieving.
Yeah.
I don't know how long it's going to take me, but I have to be present in grief. I can't just say I'll put it off. We were talking about that earlier where Ashlyn was saying like she didn't even know she was grieving.
Yeah.
And then she realized that, oh my gosh, she saw another friend grieving, and then she realized I'm doing that. That's grief. Oh my gosh, I didn't realize it was. And she had shut herself down for a while, and then realized when she was watching somebody else grief, like, I can't shut myself down. I actually need to go through that. And I think that's important to allow yourself to go through it. Reach out to people, reach out to God. And not everyone's grief is going to look the same.
No.
You know, like some people grieve harder than others, and that's just the way it is. And we just need to be patient and long suffering with each other. I don't know if that helps you. I mean, that's basically more defining grief.
Yeah.
No, I think that's always a good point. And I think for anyone who's watching this now, if they've experienced grief, they would relate to this.
Yeah.
And for those who haven't, again, it's being patient, being supportive, and we like when they're mourning, mourn with them. When they're joyful, be joyful with them.
Yeah, exactly.
Go with them. And I think that's just part of fellowship. For me, when I lost my gran, the grief there, as I've got older and as the years have progressed, like maybe sometimes I'll think back and go, oh, I wish my gran was here. But it's laying at God's feet and knowing that, like, that's God's my comfort. My fellowship's my comfort, and that's everything's okay.
Yeah. And there's questions like with grief, like, will they be in heaven? Will I be in heaven with them? And because we're believers, we have certain views on that. But, you know, why would God begrudge you your pet in heaven?
But if you guys if you are struggling with grief or anything with that, reach out to us. We're more than willing to chat to you and pray with you. We might even put down below like some counselling services that might be beneficial.
Call Chris's house.
Beneficial for you. Just numbers for you if you like, I want to contact someone and help me with this. So we'll put that all in the little description box down below, like you'll see it. Or you can reach us on Cornerstone Shots. We've got Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, any social media. You can reach out, talk to us, and we'll be praying for you, and we'll try and direct you the best way that we can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have nothing else to add. Robert stole my job as per usual. So we will see you next week, and we'll say goodbye to Dani for just now.
Bye, guys.
All right. Goodbye.
Cheers. See you later.